Well, as we've just seen, because of the impact of Large Combustion Plant Directive, we see probably 12.5 gigawatts of oil and coal-fired generation coming off the network. And if we then add on the nuclear retirements, that represents about 20 gigawatts of plant coming off the system. Now, if you consider that the installed capacity at the moment is something between 75 and 80 gigawatts, that's an awful lot of generation coming off. We believe that will be replaced by significant renewable energy sources, most of which will be wind. We've heard that a couple of times this morning. And actually, we estimate more wind than DEC and others are expecting, 32 gigawatts in our modelling, 21 gigawatts of which would be offshore. Now, in this, which is what we call our green scenario, we absolutely do see a role for other renewable sources, such as wave biomass, as we've just heard, solar PV, others, the sort of technologies, the sort of sources that are represented by many of the organisations in this room today. But to reiterate, we do expect the majority of it to come from wind. Now, given the low load factors associated with wind, that means that we also expect to see a significant amount of non-renewable build. So in this potential world, there would be maybe 3 gigawatts of nuclear by the end of this time frame, so perhaps the first 2 nuclear stations coming online. The demonstration plants for carbon capture and storage coming online, and we saw in the Queen's speech new incentives towards the demonstration plants for CCS. Significant amount of new gas, actually, to take into account the fact that we need energy when the wind isn't blowing, and also to help provide a bit of a bridge to when some of the new nuclear stations come online. Under this scenario, we could see UK meeting its 2020 targets, renewable generation going from the 5% that Malcolm was mentioning up to sort of 36%. But that provides some very significant challenges for the market in terms of the market itself, the network owners, and indeed the operators. So what are those challenges? Well, if we look first at the issue of investment requirements, the Electricity Network Strategy Group report published by DEC and Ofgem earlier this year detailed the transmission system requirements that would be necessary to cope with this potential future world. It envisaged a lot of onshore renewables, so onshore wind in Scotland, but also the potential for tidal and offshore wind coming down of Scotland. A lot of wind off the east coast here, and also, of course, the potential for new nuclear stations, the likes of Sizewell, and we've seen the more recent announcements on the new nuclear sites. And then finally, in the south west and Wales, potential for the whole lot, actually, onshore and offshore wind, and indeed new nuclear. The potential cost of that, £4.7 billion, as shown on the chart. Two notable things I'd just like to point out here: high voltage offshore DC interconnectors to help bring renewable energy down from Scotland. We have already, with Scottish Power, let contracts for the surveys for the West Coast Link, and we've already signalled to the market that we'll be going out to tender to get partners to help us actually deliver that link. So if we've considered the onshore requirements, what about the offshore requirements? What might be needed there? Well, the current estimates are those networks could cost in the region of £15 billion between now and 2020. In addition to the offshore requirements, then as part of the future, we do expect to see increased interconnectivity with the rest of Europe, and we're actively looking at interconnectors to France, to Belgium, and to Norway. Potential cost of those, not yet fully defined, but very, very big sums indeed. And of course, we shouldn't forget that in addition to this new investment, we've got the existing grid that needs continued investment in terms of replacement. So despite ongoing condition monitoring, dynamic asset management, we will probably have to spend several £billion between now and 2020. If we add in talk of offshore supergrids and the money spent on the development of smart grids, then you realise actually the total sums that have to be invested to deliver this low-carbon renewable future are huge indeed. So we've looked at the electricity generation picture. I said in my opening remarks that there's a huge interaction between gas and electricity, so let's look at a potential gas world. Starting in the same place as we did with electricity, where's the gas going to come from? This is happening so quickly. Go back to the start of the current decade, pretty well all our gas was coming off the UKCS, UK Continental Shelf, North Sea. We've seen the decline in UKCS supplies, and already gas coming in, extra gas coming from Norway, liquefied natural gas, elsewhere on the continent, to meet our demand. Going forward, UKCS will continue to decline, and by the end of the decade, we'll probably be seeing something like 80% of our gas coming from elsewhere, much larger role for liquefied natural gas as well. So, it started to decline. What's been happening? Last couple of years, 3 or 4 years actually, significant investment in the UK. New gas coming in, Langled Field came in, Bacton Balzand interconnector, new LNG coming in at the Isle of Grain, Milford Haven terminals, new £1 billion pipeline to connect that to the grid, Teesside development, it goes on and on and on. So there has been substantial investment in terms of actually making sure that as UKCS goes down, that we can continue to actually balance the gas networks. However, looking forward, there are issues around will there be sufficient potential capacity to meet demand. On the left-hand side of the chart here is demand. On the right-hand side, the various sources of gas that could come into the UK. UKCS declined, but still important and valuable. Norwegian gas, important to us. Liquefied natural gas coming in tankers from wherever you choose around the world, so we're absolutely linked to global energy prices. Gas coming in from the continent, and a big question around will the new storage facilities be built? And I think one of the key issues for the government of the future, of whatever hue, is if they are going to be a bit more interventionist than they are today, how do they do that and actually not spook the market in terms of actually delivering the energy infrastructure for the UK? So will the market provide what we need? Will the gas flow across the interconnectors? And indeed, will LNG come to the UK rather than elsewhere in the world? And I remember the winter of 05-06, when LNG tankers were steaming towards the UK, and then there was Hurricanes Katrina and Rita in the US. They just kept going. It's a very liquid market, LNG, and that wasn't meant as a pun, but it is a very liquid market. So under this scenario, potentially 80% of gas being imported, increased reliance on CCGTs. What does that mean for the gas transmission network? Well, if you want to build a fully flexible gas network so you can cater for supplies coming from anywhere, whether it's Milford Haven, whether it's Grain, Teesside, interconnectors, wherever, then you might need to invest about £3 billion or up to £3 billion in order to provide the flexibility that you need. If you think about the investment on the demand side, so providing for the new CCGTs that will be built, then to cope with their ramp rates, you might need further investment on the system. Now, while I'm touching on gas, I'll just touch on an issue that I think we all recognise is going to be important for the future in terms of meeting both our generation needs and indeed our carbon reduction targets. That's the issue of carbon capture